You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Adler and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 613 that we're going to continue on with our character spotlight episodes on Andor. And I don't know that we could have picked a finer character to spotlight on other than Mon Mothma tonight. So a character that has been with us for 40 something years now, and feels like we really got to know her just in the last probably 2 or 3 years. So help me tonight to help me break down Mon Mothma is, of course, as always, Jonesy. Jonesy, welcome to the show. How are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing fantastic. Yeah, this is really exciting to be able to come in and talk about Mon Mothma. I think within the framework of season 2 of Andor, but it's hard not to talk about the character, like you said, across almost 50 years of content. Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's kind of nuts. Is it really 50? Was it 40?
Well, was she in A New Hope?
No,
I guess
no. She was in Jedi.
Yeah, just Jedi. So 40 plus, yeah. 40
but still 40 plus. It's a long time.
I'm just rounding up. Yeah.
So, but yeah, hey, before we jump into all of this, how about some shout outs and thank yous to some very special folks?
Yeah, huge shout out to all of our Patreon members, cantinacast.com/Patreon. If you are curious and would like to join up, we got a tier for everybody. And a special thanks to our now part of the tribe members, Alex, Dante, Danny, Daz. I've got a Brad, Phelan, Jackson, Jacob, Josh, Mike, Reader Reborn, Sharkman Dan, Uncle Leon, and our Delusional Stranger members. Now, this is Rod Racing, CJ, Steve, and Rob. Thank you all so much for your continued support. I will relearn the pattern here and get into a rhythm a little bit better. Albert, you missed it. When Laura and I did the show the other day,
yeah,
I had to shake all the names up. We've had some Patreon changes, and so I was like, okay, I'll just do them alphabetically, and I am struggling to get through it. Like, I had a rhythm, it was all going well, and that was just awkward.
Yeah.
But anyway, huge thanks to all of our Patreon members. Shout out to everyone who's coming out for the live stream, cantinacast.com/YouTube. If you are listening to this, thanks for the download. We'd love to have you come out and join us in the live stream like some of these amazing people already out there, raring to go. Risk, good to see you, bud. Alex, Steph, Music Train, Zeralins, One Up versus CPU, my Star Wars guys. We see you folks out there in the background too. We hope you'll come out and say hello. Give us your thoughts on Mon Mothma as we go through the show. We'll make sure we get them up on screen. And again, thanks for coming out. cantinacast.com/YouTube if you want to join us.
Yeah. And don't forget, Jonesy, do you want to plug the show real quickly that you and Lauren just did? I know you just mentioned it, but what did you guys cover?
Yeah, we had to get Lauren's excited about Adam Christopher writing Master of Evil, the Darth Vader novel coming in November, and so we decided to do a short story from Adam Christopher called The Witness, from a certain point of view, The Empire Strikes Back. So kind of a cool little story. We had a great conversation. Hope everyone enjoyed that. And if you'd like to go check that out, that's on the public live stream under JNA Live. It's also on the Jedi Novel Archive playlist on YouTube. So thanks to Laura for coming out. It was a lot of fun. And I'm telling you, man, I keep petitioning for you guys to do a High Republic retrospective. I started making notes for y'all about what I want y'all to cover. Like in my head, I've already started to jot out an outline of all the things I want you guys to cover and do. I'm almost done with Trials of the Jedi. Almost done.
Yeah, okay.
So then we can finally talk about it in more detail. But yeah, I'm a little slow.
Yeah, I know. And that has nothing to do with you personally. Also,
well, a little bit, but yeah.
Well, maybe, yeah. But let's see, programming notes. So we'll be back on Wednesday next week. So a week from today with our Patreon show, and then after that we'll pick up the the Andor character spotlights, and we're gonna do one that we call the Empire and the Rebellion. So this is kind of a catch-all for a lot of the characters that didn't necessarily have, bigger parts. We're grouping them together. And then after we're done with that, just to kind of look ahead, the last 2 episodes that we've got slotted for the spotlight is going to be Bix, and then we'll end with, of course, Cassian Andor. So that'll take us probably into August at this point, just with summer and all the things going on. But we've got at least 2 more of those, and we're saving kind of the best for last. Although I will say that this is going to be a fun discussion about Mon Mothma, just given everything that's happened here recently. So please join us for the Patreon show next week, as well as the Sunday show where we'll break down the Empire and Rebellion characters from Andor. All right.
Well, I think what would be fun with the Empire and the Rebellion is talk about the factions as a whole and how they've changed over time. I mean, like you said, we've been with these characters and with the scenarios for 40, 50 years now. So how have they shifted in our perspective, and how the show kind of shift some of that too, when you just take a step back and look at what they're doing and how we viewed the Empire in A New Hope versus how we see it now in Andor. I think would be just kind of an interesting journey of our own kind of Star Wars journeys, because you and I have just grown up with this stuff. So interesting how our perspectives are changing a little bit on it too. So that one should be fun. We hope everyone comes out for it.
Yep. Okay, well, let's talk about Mon Mothma. And I thought maybe we could just kind of start and pick away at just kind of our own personal experiences with this character. And we mentioned it's been 40 plus years now since she was introduced. For us, it came in at a time when we were both really young and very impressionable. So I just kind of want to know on a personal level for you, and I kind of suspect it's going to be the same answer that I have. But where did Mon Mothma start with you, and then when did she finally, I guess, garner your attention or really kind of be a highlight for you in the Star Wars universe?
Well, yeah, I think we may have talked about this because we did do a Mon Mothma episode like before Andor, kind of getting ready for it. We talked a little bit about this then of, the character really didn't mean a whole lot to us. It was kind of a one-line character. The actress wasn't really give a lot of meat, for the character. Many Mothans died, to bring us this information. I think it was the legendary line, the iconic line at this point. But it wasn't until we started getting into, I think, really the animated series where we started to see a little bit more of that. Maybe Revenge of the Sith with the deleted scenes, we started to see the character and see the bridge and start to bring that forward. And of course, Genevieve O'Reilly was part of that. But I think it was when the animated series came around, we started to actually appreciate what was going on in the Senate and what they were actually doing to facilitate and then give actual birth to the rebellion formally in that series. So I think that's when I finally understood how important the character was and actually found her interesting, I think, from a developmental standpoint.
Yeah. And I would say, just to add on to that, they kind of played it safe too, because I mean, yes, she was instrumental in the building of the rebellion and all that. And she certainly, when she showed up in Clone Wars and then, Star Wars Rebels, it was still pretty safely played in terms of what they did, right? They didn't really kind of go too far with the character. And I think we'll talk about this a little bit later, but I mean, that was one of the more appealing aspects of the character for Tony Gilroy coming in, and to kind of having this white blank canvas to really lay out. He needed somebody to kind of drive a lot of this narrative and kind of be, the second storyline, if you will, for Cassian Andor. And she just happened to be like the perfect, again, blank canvas, white canvas for him to kind of paint with. And so for me, it was around that same time. Like I certainly enjoyed the character. Well, let me back up. Like I remember the character from the movie, and of course I didn't really care. I could give two craps about Mon Mothma in that line. Although I will say, when she delivers that line, this is Caroline Blacken, wasn't her name? Blacken, forget her last name.
Yeah, Blackiston.
When she delivers that line, I always enjoyed the way it was like very foreboding and heavy, like many Bothans died, and you're like, whoa, what the heck's a Bothan, right? I mean, that it's just one simple line. We're still
trying to figure out what a Bothan is.
Yeah, there's a lot of debate about what a Bothan is even to this day. But yeah, I mean, there was something about that line that it was just, even that little small delivery that she gave was very intriguing and certainly sets up, potential for storyline down the road. But I didn't really care any more than that. I do remember back in 1984, I think maybe, I had like the Return of the Jedi cards, like the Topps trading cards.
Right.
And there was a card that I had of her, and I had a bunch of these, and probably because they were the ones getting traded the most, or people didn't want them or whatever, because again, it was kind of a throwaway character. But I went and found it, I don't have it anymore, but I went and found it because I wanted to remember what it said on the back, and I just want to read this real quick. It says, Mon Mothma, leader of the Rebel Alliance, is a woman committed to the concept of freedom. Hers is an awesome responsibility. Thwart the evil, aggressive empire, and at the same time hold rebel losses to a minimum. So again, pretty safely played to the chest. I mean, there's really nothing going on there, but it was just funny. And then I think in 98 when they did the Power of the Force action figures, I remember that was the first time we actually had an action figure of her that came out. I think I've got one buried in a box somewhere along with 8 million other Power of the Force characters I got. Right. But all that to say, like, I really wasn't a Mon Mothma fan. I don't even know that I honestly can, with a very sincere heart, say that I was a big fan of her during the Clone Wars. Yeah. I remember when the prequel trilogy came out and we finally got the behind the scenes stuff when the DVD came out or whatever. That was interesting to see. But again, it was kind of like, oh, well, they're throwaway scenes. And it was cool that they brought that character. It was really neat to kind of see what she looked like as a younger character. But it really wasn't, I don't think, for me personally, until probably Star Wars Rebels, that I really felt like, oh, this is somebody that was intriguing, and mostly because of the episode that you and I broke down, that kind of bridges that gap between Andor and Star Wars Rebels, yeah, and of course, Rogue One. But yeah, I mean, it's been Andor has really done so much for this character in so many ways, a level of complexity that I never thought would have been achievable or could have been possible. And I don't know why I did that, because I mean, after having seen Rogue One and knowing Tony Gilroy's background and what he does with character developments, it's pretty obvious now that it's like, wow, yeah, I mean, we kind of got what we probably deserved and should have figured we were going to get from somebody like Gilroy, given this character. But so many different layers. We're going to pull these layers back and really kind of get into all of that. But speaking of,
well, before we go that, you mentioned something there that's maybe important to touch on. If we would have had Mon Mothma, by herself within Andor, I think it would have a bit of a tougher sell, I think, to understand this character and be able to dig into her. You really needed characters like Perrin and I forgot her friend, and kind of that whole scenario with the kids as well in the marriage. And then, of course, you definitely needed Luthen, I think, to pull some of these emotion and these conflicts out of her and to kind of present them, to really give that character some layering. I think when we look at Andor, taking a step back, as individual as many of these characters are, there's a lot of ensemble to this show where these characters play off one another, and the actors have to play off one another so well. And I think that's what gives them that added depth. It's not any individual performance or individual monologue or situations or scenarios. Every time we've talked about one of them, typically, not all the time, but often there's another character that is influencing that scene or it's involved in that scene. And I think Mon Mothma is one of those characters that's been able to evolve positively by having these other influences around her and then being able to respond to them. And how does she react? And how does that fit within the rebellion? How does that fit within her need to maintain secrecy, as well as the dilemmas that she's presented with? So I think that's what makes her character interesting, is just all of this conflict that makes her way to her doorstep is what she's trying to, push forward narratively for the rebellion in particular.
Yeah. And the way, so I want to just quickly segue into talking about Genevieve O'Reilly, because we've talked about the writing already, and you bring up a very good point that she is kind of putting these situations, these relationships that really bring out a lot of that conflict, a lot of that drama, a lot of what keeps us kind of holding on to that our last breath as we're trying to learn more about her, and just the secrecy and the lies and this web of chaoticness that she's created, for all the right reasons. But a lot of it has to go back to Genevieve O'Reilly too, and her portrayal of that character.
Absolutely.
You think about like that opening scene in season 2 where she's, that part. It's the where they don't cut away. I think we talked about this when we broke the show down, that episode, but she shows a ton of range of emotions, do all of that. She's got the fake smile going on. She's like, the hostess of the party as the mother of the bride kind of thing. And then, she sees Luthen show up, and you can see the disparity on her face, like, holy crap, what is he doing here kind of thing. And then she has to turn that off, switch it off, and switch it back on as somebody's passing by, turns it back off, then goes over to, what's her name? Her cousin, Vel, and then she's got a totally different range of emotion there. And then she comes, and then, what's his name? Skolden pops up, and Luthen's there. And I mean, it's just
the stuff with Tay and
exactly. I mean, she's just bouncing around through all these different emotions. And every one of these, are kind of what you were saying, like she's having to feed off all of the other characters, and it kind of really provides a lot of that depth. So all that to say, like, I really just want to shout out to Genevieve O'Reilly for this. I actually went back because I had never really seen anything from her ever outside of Star Wars. And so I went back and just tried to pull up some things that I had seen or, had found. There was a TV show that she'd done, a lot of British television. And I pulled that up, and it was very awkward to see her kind of like in jeans and cursing. And at one point I saw her, she was a scene where she takes a shotgun and she rams it into somebody's chest and knocks him down. And then she puts it over his head and she's cursing. And I mean, she's just got like, they really did put her into other things, either more television or more movies. But man, she did an incredible job in this series. And I really hope that this is something of a springboard to get her career going more than she has in the past. Or I don't know, maybe she's tempered it. Maybe she likes that she's doing, little bits and pieces really here. But man, if you go out and do a search for her, all you find are like Andor clips. Like there is nothing else that's really out there. You have to go search pretty deep to find other stuff, which is probably cool for us, but she has more to her. So love to see that play out somewhere.
Right.
Okay. So one of the, I guess, kind of questions that we've been kicking around to kind of kick things off for these characters is talking about their personality and their traits. What are some of those characteristics that come to mind when you think about somebody like Mon Mothma? And we can go back as far as you want, really. Like I said, you made a good point at the very beginning. I mean, it's hard not to talk about all the history that's there with her from canonically. So, but throughout her journey, what are some of the character traits that or personality traits that you would associate with Mon Mothma?
Yeah, I think when we looked at her from like the original way the character was portrayed is very stoic, right? And very regal, I think, to an extent as well. I think as we've seen the character mature, though, we see this courageousness that comes out. But what I find the most interesting about the character is how conflicted she is. And I think when you look at like Alexander Freed's book for Mask of Fear from Reign of the Empire, you see it really clearly, that pairing it with Andor. And I know we've talked ad nauseum about this, but you really see the depth of Mon Mothma, and you see the conflict and the dilemmas that she has, and you could just feel that she's torn all the time. And so that really conflicted nature, but also I hesitate to use this word because I think some people might view this negatively, but I view it almost as a positive. And I think Luthen insulated her to where this is real is the word naive to an extent, and maybe just a little naive. And nothing bordering on delusional, but I think just a little naive as to what is really going on or what some of the things are. She's able to just have that. She can keep things a bit at arm's length. Yeah. And Luthen is really good at insulating from all of that just to make sure that she's protected, but also so she doesn't have to go and lie, right? But she almost has to ignore some of the realities that are going on in order to maintain more of that purity. But of course, we know that she doesn't have all of that purity, even though we've always kind of associated that with her in some way. But those were kind of the top 4 or 5 words that came to mind. What about you?
Yeah. I like that last one. I hadn't considered that. There is a bit of that. And some of that is not really her fault, right? It's just she's being introduced or being brought into this world of, espionage and
some
all
of
that.
It's a choice, though. She's kind of making a choice a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think some of it's a little bit of self-preservation in that way to an extent. Yeah.
We'll touch on that here in a little bit. 'Cause she kind of goes through different phases of her career. Even personally, she does in a lot of ways. So, I had brave as out there, certainly outspoken. We saw glimpses of that. We had glimpses of that even in the scenes that were cut out of the prequel trilogy, who were kind of speaking up about things. Of course, we had the speech that we're going to get into a little bit later. Very direct in terms of what she says at times. We actually had a good example of that in season 1 when Skolden had showed up and was about to, talk about maybe bringing his son over. She was very direct about everything that was going on during that time, and she kind of had that throughout. I had pragmatic. I think she's almost to a fault in some ways. Maybe that's kind of leading into what you were just saying a little bit earlier about being a little naive on some of this stuff. But then like the words that the other descriptors that were kind of I guess maybe not negative descriptors, but a little bit different. I had compressed on here. Like it's just, and this is what you were talking about, that the conflict and the complicated life that she was living. I mean, everything, like the weight literally of the entire galaxy was on her shoulders. And if that wasn't enough, she had the weight of her family on her shoulders and, people within different alliances and the relationships and the secrets and all of that was just weighing and just, it felt like she was just being, forced into this pressure cooker until she finally broke, which we'll get into a little bit later as well. And I think part of that kind of led into her being, I had originally wrote alone. And I just said more lonely than alone. I mean, because she had friends that were around.
I think that's a better way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just lonely, trying to live this life and having very few people that she can actually talk to and show emotion and show feelings towards. I mean, she didn't even have her daughter or her husband around to do these things, right? Which we all know.
And we really saw that isolation, like in season 2, when even her aide has betrayed her in a way, right? Yeah. And she dismisses him, and you finally kind of see her break down and kind of feel it. Although we saw it all the way throughout season 1 with the family too.
Yeah,
I like the dimensions of that isolation that we get from her. It's kind of ripe for picking of some of the interesting.
Yeah, as I was Yeah, no, and as I was writing all those down, and I put this down in the show notes. I don't know if you saw it. I listed it as, quote, the appendix. We've never had an appendix in show notes. I didn't know what to call this, but I wanted to at some point try to call back Luthen's speech, because as I was writing this down, I'm like, holy crap, these are some of the things that Luthen was talking about as well, right? Calm, kindness, kinship, love. I've given all chance at inner peace. I mean, that could have been Mon Mothma speaking those same lines, given what, everything that we just talked about. And we're going to get into a little bit later about talking about some of the sacrifices that she's had to make in her role, both as a politician and this kind of fledgling rebel leader. But the other, I guess, some of the other words is, so not only was she lonely, but then she was trapped. Like, she was trapped both personally and politically. She was backed into corners many, many times. She was living in fear. There was a sense of paranoia that was spreading around, and it even started to seep into people that she thought she could trust, like Luthen, right? When we get to the very, very end of season 2, when Luthen is trying to tell her, look, hey, the people that were going to escort her out were the bad guys or whatever. And he's like, you need to trust my guy or whatever. She was thinking, oh my God, you're going to kill me because I'm now a risk, or I'm a liability to all this. I can't even trust you. But I mean, she was just living trapped this entire time. Again, both politically and personally, and then living this lie, right? The amount of lies and the weaving of these lies sounded like it got more and more complex. Now, we didn't have the benefit of understanding what happened thoroughly in those last 5 years, but there was a part as I was rewatching, I felt like she's really kind of trying to remember and keep it all straight in her head after, so many years. This can't, it was bound to happen that she would bust or break or try to get away from it all and try to wipe the slate clean and start over, kind of thing. But there was a line in there. I think it was in season 2, or maybe it was season 1, when she was talking to Tay Kolma, and she says, it's a lie, it's a projection, it's a front. And then she tells him, smile. I learned from Palpatine. I show you the stone in my hand, you miss a knife at your throat. Right? Living like that, right? She's having to live like that is very stressful. It is, again, a front, all of that, all the smiling and smirking and trying to be pleasant and, courteous to everybody, when down deep inside of her, she's just kind of burning away, given everything that had happened.
Using the tools of her enemy to defeat them.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Back to that speech that we had there. So one last thing, and I don't know if this is necessarily a characteristic or a trait, but you remember I already forgot who said everyone has their own rebellion. I think that was that Clea? No, it wasn't Clea. It was Vale, I think it was, that said that at some point.
Maybe, yeah.
But someone said, everyone has your own rebellion. And really all of this is kind of her own rebellion, right? Everything that we've just talked about is her own internal rebellion that she's having with herself and fighting other rebellions against other people. And I think that's why, and I don't know if we'll get a chance to really talk about this, but for all the jokes that have been made and all the YouTube videos of 24 hours of Mon Mothma raving, that scene was really her finally just trying to, feeling like she was in a prison and she's got to release it somehow, right? And she was going to get tanked and just try to not to even think or worry about how far down this rabbit hole she went and, what some of these circumstances were going to be, the outcomes were going to be, and knowing that they're probably future outcomes that are going to be even worse down the road, and that it's too late. I mean, she's already gone too far with all of this.
Right. Yeah. Brisk is agreeing with you there. The only time we saw her let go was during the wedding dance.
Yep. And that's why, she was just throwing them back over and over again, which.
Yeah, there's been
we've all been there, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. There's been like pockets of it, but you're right. She hasn't just completely dismissed everything and just kind of let everything fall by the wayside and just be in the moment. I think she's always had to have the walls up. There's always something going on. I think also another word that kind of comes to mind for those that have read the book from Alexander Freed, of course, is a survivor in a way too, because she was a political prisoner for a short period of time immediately following Order 66. She was put in a cell. She soiled herself. It was a certain type of mental torture, right? Psychological torture of what they did to her and to other senators as well in order to make a point. And so you have a lot of that psychological stuff. And I think she's very psychologically strong, I think, in that way. She's able to compartmentalize it and be able to reconcile it. And even when she has all of this anxiety, which is explored in the book quite a bit, she still has a way through it in a way forward, that she has that perseverance. I think that she's unwilling to yield in the face of all of what Palpatine and everybody across the Empire is really doing in that name.
Yeah, there's a bit of defiance in her, or a lot of defiance in her.
Absolutely.
But okay, let's talk about the different roles. And what I mean by this is, if you think about Mon Mothma, one of the cool complexities of her character is the fact that she was a politician. She was a mother, which we didn't know until Andor, which I thought was brilliant. Of course, a wife. We assume some of that was probably true. I don't remember in Legends. I don't remember her being married. I'm trying to think back to like the Thrawn books and all that.
It was never explored at the very least, even if it was mentioned. Yeah.
Right. So not only did we get this layer of her, being married, but then we find out it's not even a great marriage, which we can talk about here in a second as well. And then on top of all that, she's got this leader aspect of her in some ways. I mean, she starts off kind of as a financial backer, for lack of a better term. Yeah, she's leading the rebellion. She's leading the Senate and trying to do good there as a politician. But then that slowly starts to morph over time into her becoming kind of this full-fledged rebel leader, eventually going into becoming the leader of the Rebel Alliance, and then later down the road in canon, going into that first chancellor role of the New Republic. So she's kind of been thrust into all of that. So she kind of comes back, I guess, into the political role. But throughout all of that, I guess, what are some of the things that stood out, some of the highlights for, I guess, each of those, or, maybe a politician. Yeah,
with politician, I don't know if we saw, Mask of Fear did such a great job of diving into the really low-level details of this. So if you want to see Mon Mothma really in her political arena, along with Bail Organa, I think you really have to go read the book. I don't know if Andor gives us quite enough of what she was having to do, the types of deals. It was a different era too, so they were trying to work it. But you see her commitment and her passion to the Senate and to democracy and the way that the government should work. She really absolutely loves the give and the take and the bartering and the game that goes with it, because that means that it's working. Everybody has a say. Everybody has to give in order to get, and she loves being in the middle of that and making things work, until she starts having to compromise some of her morals and her values. And then she starts to have a lot of second guessing, right? And she knows that she's betraying some characters. But I think from her purest standpoint, that's really what she wants. She just wants that body to function, because that's how your government is working in the best interest of the people, is when you all have to figure out a way to make it all work. Mm-hmm. And I think that Alexander Freed did an amazing job in the book. It probably didn't fit as well within the Andor series, but we did get a bit of a flavor of it when you look at kind of the political aspects of even like the arranged marriage, right? And you see that with Golden and just having to negotiate like it's a deal of sorts. So it kind of bridges back into that world, and you get a flavor of it too with what she's doing with Takeova and how are we going to secure money? What do I need to do to be able to secure money? How do we make sure that we're kind of hiding it, And so you were right. These roles kind of bleed together and bleed into one another, because she's using that political front to help maneuver some of these other activities behind the scenes.
Yeah. I mean, she's a character that was born into the political system. I think, she was 14, or she was a young girl when she was brought in as a senator was she a senator for Chandrilla that early?
I think she was like a junior senator or something.
Something like that. Yeah. I mean, she definitely.
Sometimes I blend her with Leia.
I know. I do the same thing too. Yeah. But either way, it was a very young age that she was kind of born into the system. She was always, at least initially, she was very consistent about trying to make the system work, right? Trying to do everything. You were kind of touching on this, but trying to do everything through the system, following the letter of the law, trying to rally support. We got, this was extended even into season 2. When we first see her, we kind of get that quick montage of her going around and trying to do all that elbow work of going and rubbing elbows and shaking hands and stuff with all the senators, trying to get on their side in order to garner the votes and the support that she needed to pass legislation for the benefit of, her planet and, of course, the galaxy at large. So, I mean, she was really good at that, too. We don't get that sense in Andor. We get a little bit of it maybe in Clone Wars. But for the most part, it's like you said, it's Alexander Freed's book is really where you're going to see a lot of her political savviness. So we just have to take it for granted, if you haven't read that book, that she is really good at that and knows how to work the system there.
A smidge of it maybe with the Gorman crisis,
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe a little bit, but yeah, nothing to the level of detail we had. So we've recommended the book a number of times, but that was actually surprisingly interesting and good. Yeah.
The other aspect about her politically that is interesting, and it doesn't really play, I don't know, maybe it does. Maybe it plays into season 2 of Andor or even season 1 of Andor, but she was always kind of a pacifist, right? She was always taking the path of least resistance. Going back to what we just talked about during the prequel trilogy, when those scenes that were cut out, that was her really kind of saying, look, we need to do this, but you got a sense that there was a sense of trepidation in trying to, like, she didn't want to start a war. She wasn't trying to, she wanted to still kind of work within that system and not de-escalate things as much as possible, diffuse things as much as possible. This comes back to bite her, both in, well, at least in canon, it does later down the road when she becomes chancellor and starts to demilitarize everything, which, is kind of the right thing to do. You think of like superpowers today. That's exactly what we've done. The U.S. and Russia at one point, decided, look, we've got way too many nukes out there. Let's demilitarize a lot of that stuff. Let's show good grace and humility here and know that we don't need to have that many. And she was trying to do the same thing. And of course, this is what opened her up for the First Order to kind of start to rise and become overpower the New Republic. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later, but it is important to remember that she was thinking throughout all of this that it was peace first, right? Before we get into, acts of violence or insurrection or rebellion or whatever it was. And I think that's where, when she starts meeting up with characters like Luthen Rael and Saw Gerrera, it was kind of like, whoa, this is a conflict of ideologies here. And even with, I was going to say Jimmy Smits, even with Bail Organa, there was a lot of conflict there and who was right and what was the right way and the right approach to do some of this stuff. How do we maneuver in this? And you had a number of people at the table there that were like, no, we just got to kill people and we got to blow stuff up. War is hell. This is the only way we're going to win. We have to become like them. And that really was pushing up against her moral compass in a lot of ways.
I think this is why Luthen really felt like he had to keep her clean, because he wants her to be that person that's always fighting for the right way of doing it and pushing the right agenda. And we do solve this in the Senate, even if there's dirty work being done on the side. Keep her as far away from some of that as possible, at least in the public eye, to where you can't put that on her, and that she's the one that you can, again, escalate when things are done and rise her to the surface of saying, this is the person we want, to lead us. I think it's really critical. And again, we talked about the ensembleness of all of this. That's important, why these characters are there, that insulation, that buffer, and making sure that she doesn't make a critical mistake in that arena. But you're right, she does want to solve everything on the Senate floor, right? I mean, she doesn't advocate violence. I think throughout the Clone Wars, we saw some of those episodes as well. Yeah. Lauren and I talked about one with the Padme short story that was a companion to the Clone Wars episodes too, with Padme and Bail Organa. But Mon Mothma was in that realm, in that order of, we don't want to keep raising money to basically kill clones or to kill innocent people or to starve people and take away resources from the rest of the Republic at that time. And Mon Mothma was very much in that same vein of making sure that we take care of our people and we take care of our business and we find a way to do it all together. But when that falls apart, and that's why it is so stark whenever she does get involved with these militaristic faction aspects of things, that's very against what she really feels comfortable doing. And we see some of that play out in Andor too. And even when she gets escorted out or rescued by Cassian, she's absolutely shocked with the violence that's finally kind of hitting her doorstep, even though she knows it's existed the entire time. And she just kind of keeps able to turn a blind eye, even though she knows what happened to Tay.
Oh yeah.
Right. And she knows some of these other things. She knows what Vel is up to, but she's able to somehow not invest herself in the activities that are happening.
Just one final quick note on her politically that I thought was certainly a highlight for her. She was very authentic in the way, she went about fighting for the things that she believed in. And I think a lot of the senators saw that in her. That's why she was able to do not only a lot of good things in the Senate, but then later on, when it became apparent that they needed somebody to kind of take over as a de facto leader, she was kind of the person that immediately rose to the top, right? She had a lot of great relationships that she created. People felt like they could trust her. She was very genuine whenever she was talking to them. She was always looking out for people and not necessarily her own personal wealth or her personal popularity. So these are all qualities that you would think would exist in a politician, a good politician, if there is such a thing. But she kind of exemplified a lot of that until, of course, she didn't. Right. I mean, she started dipping into the bad stuff there because she had to. But yeah, I think it's important to kind of keep that in mind, because a lot of that, like I said, does play into how successful she becomes or unsuccessful she becomes later after the fall of the empire. But let's talk about her as a mother, and really just kind of those aspects, because that is one aspect of her that, yes, war is bad and the rebellion's bad, and all the conflict and the relationships she's trying to keep and the lies she's trying to keep with all these other political and powerful figures in Star Wars. But then you get back to her home life and it's just a wreck, man. I mean, it's so sad to think that her relationship with Lita, because I genuinely believe this, and I think we talked about this when we broke down one of the episodes. It did feel, in my own headcanon, that she probably had a very close relationship with Lita growing up, and at some point, either around the time of puberty or around the time she got more involved with the Senate and spending less time with her kid and her family because of all of that. Somewhere they started kind of drifting away, and Lita started becoming more attached and more like her father than, like Mon was. And that really kind of escalates and culminates in that final scene there where right before the wedding, and, she's trying to, thinking I'm going to get through to her. She's going to hear this message and immediately it's going to resonate with her. She's going to understand where I'm coming from. I'm going to give her the out that I was never giving, and not, push her into this lifestyle that is antiquated and nobody follows anymore. And it doesn't really speak to free agency and et cetera, et cetera. And then, to have her daughter kind of throw that back in her face and, make the line of like, I wish you were drunk, because I can't believe you're saying these things to me. I mean, just that expression, again, going back to what O'Reilly does with the acting there and the writing, of course, but then, trying to save face by saying, look, get behind me, kid. Even this is, we're back, I'm going to put up the wheel of the shield and really kind of gather myself here, because I mean, that was absolutely devastating, absolutely destroying. And if you're as a parent, anytime you get like feedback from a child, whether it's, real or not, it hurts. And you could see the devastation on her face when that happened. So it is just sad to think that she had that relationship. She probably had a good relationship with Lita at some point, and by the time we get to Andor, it's gone in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's hard to talk about this without working parent in there, kind of working the wife angle.
No, and feel free
right?
to do so. Feel free to do so.
Yeah, I think we almost kind of have to, right? Because parent's a big part of that, because, parent believes in the traditional values of the Chandrilan culture. And you could tell that that's a bit of a split. That's a bit of a divide for them. They were arranged for a marriage, and he has a strong connection with those. And Mon Mothma's been repelling and trying to resist against the cultural norms for a very long time, and has gave in when maybe she really thought she shouldn't have, in retrospect, and again, when she tries to correct those mistakes, like you were pointing out with Lita, for them, she finally has I think one of the times she finally builds up the courage to be able to confront her daughter and say, look, you have like these feelings that you have, this conflict in you. It's okay. Like, let's pause. Let's think it over. Let's talk more about it. No one's going to think anything more of you. And we could come back and you could still do it if you want. I mean, she didn't say so many things, but as a parent, that's what you would say, right? It's like, let's make sure that you're okay with this. There's a difference between cold feet and actually having doubt, right? And maybe Mon Mothma misread the room a little bit, or misread Lita, or maybe just Lita is like, you know what? No, you don't know me like Dad does, right?
Yeah.
And that just conflict. And again, that really ripped our hearts out with season 1, because we just felt like, and again, Tony Gilroy kind of restructured the parent character a little bit, because he wasn't happy with how we interpreted season 1. And I got to be honest, I don't know how else you would interpret season 1, because he was a bit narcissistic, and it was clear they had some weird arrangement in their relationship, and it was seeping into how they managed their daughter. And with Mon Mothma,
didn't he, like, at one point, am I remembering this incorrectly, where she wanted to do something and he was allowing her to do it, but then Mon Mothma wasn't, and so she was looking as though the bad parent and he was the good parent kind of thing?
Something like that, yeah.
If I remember correctly, but
yeah, one of those points. Like pitting one parent against the other,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
With
Yeah.
good parent, bad parent of who does what they want. And again, we in season 1 we have a different perspective than we do in season 2, where these are a little bit more grown up type of decisions. And then we start to see the cultural angle come in, which has a completely different perspective that it starts to overlay with all of that with Perrin. But it's tough when you like you said, she's juggling all of these different hats that she's trying to wear at the same time, and something has to be sacrificed. And unfortunately, it seems like it's that relationship with Lita, potentially maybe the relationship with Perrin, although it seems like that's probably been on a weird ground for a long time.
Yeah.
I hate to say rocky because it sounds like they have a certain arrangement of sorts. We don't really quite understand what the arrangement is. We could infer some things, but then we've been told that some of our inference is wrong
Yeah.
and that they don't have an open relationship type of thing necessarily, but they kind of do. And it's kind of odd how that all works, but so I think it's just interesting. But that trickles down into the relationship between mother and daughter in this, in this show, where you could tell where Lita has a lot of resentment, towards Mon Mothma. And Mon Mothma, the love is there; it never goes away. But how do you give it to someone who is angry with you? They have to be willing to let it in. And unfortunately, where we leave the series, it's really tough to see how or when or if they ever reconnect, or if they're just kind of forever separate. Or what does she do after the fall of the Empire? Does she make her way back to Lita? I mean, those are things we could speculate on, but it's something that Mon Mothma would want to do. But would Lita ever forgive her? And once she starts having children, is that something that she would invite back in, or is it the Lita and Perrin, show from here on out?
Mm-hmm.
Like it always has been, Mom. Type of scenario.
Right. So I've got some thoughts to share on Perrin, of course, but just maybe this final question for her relationship with Lita. How much blame, or how much do you hate, not like the decision that she made to allow that relationship? She didn't, betroth her daughter in any way. And she just allowed that arrangement to happen. But, in the back of her mind, she did that because she was realizing this guy's loaded with money, and she had just started that foundation. She needed money coming in. Yeah. She had already complained to Luthen that, look, or Luthen was complaining to her that, look, we need more money. And of course there was the whole heist. I don't know where that money went to, but nonetheless, she definitely saw that this, I don't know. She almost made a really difficult decision. Maybe it's not even difficult. Maybe it's just a wrong decision. I don't know how I feel. I'm struggling with this because on one hand, I'm like, that's a really horrible, horrible thing to do. But on the other hand, she didn't really push it, and she tried to give her an out at the, when it was all kind of about to really happen. But I don't know. What's your feelings on that decision that she made to allow that to happen?
It's a tough dilemma because I think you're right. It feels like Mon Mothma's back is against the corner, and that she is unsure that she has other options in order to fund and bring the money that she needs to into the rebellion, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But
to sell your daughter effectively. But I think you're right. She didn't really sell her. They started to introduce, and Skolden was very suave about this too. It's just a meeting. We're just introducing them to one another. But I think Lita, did Lita gravitate towards it because this is our culture, this is our tradition? Or is it, that's also that, he's kind of pretty to look at, but also this will piss Mom off.
So maybe as an act of rebellion in some ways.
It's a question, right? We don't know for sure, but it kind of seems like Lita sees the flags too, right? He's not really engaged in their relationship. He doesn't really communicate with her. These are her second thoughts as she's about to get married. So we know that she's not making a great decision here, but she's doing what she thinks is appropriate, for their status in their culture, as well as adhering to their traditions. And after the beautiful words that Perrin says about all of it, which I think it was actually a great speech, she is all more compelled that this is the right move, and she's got that right support from at least one of her parents. But the dilemma that she had, we talk about Mon Mothma having to sacrifice some of her kind of morality and what's right for her, right for the family, or, her values. That's one that probably digs really deep into her heart.
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear from either anybody that's with us on the live show tonight, or social media, wherever. But I do want to know, how do you feel? Was she in the wrong, or for doing what she did? Lita, because it is a very controversial question in a lot of ways, and it's very complex. So there's no real wrong or right answer, I guess, is what I'm saying. But
I mean, no, there's definitely a wrong. I mean, she's kind of wrong in this, but given the context of a tyrannical governing body that's out there killing the galaxy, we almost forgive it in a way, even though it's definitely not really what she should have done. Just the scenario the scenario that played out is probably what's wrong. That they would arrange a marriage isn't necessarily wrong, but the situation and the stakes that were at play makes it wrong, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
On the comments, Rafi Shoots is with us, says she's a very strong mentally. This is talking about the characteristics of Mon Mothma, having the patience to endure all of this with the hope of success. Also says there's a scene in Leia's book in which Moff Tarkin enters the dinner where Bail and Mon Mothma are, and it's a very tense scene. I read that book a number of years ago, and I don't remember much about it, but there was a lot of great moments, and I forgot that she was actually in that book, quite honestly. So thanks for bringing that up, Rafi. Zoralin says, I think the difference is Lita has agency. I don't think Mon's mother gave her a choice, whereas Mon gave Lita multiple chances to back out. So, and I think that's kind of what I was saying. It's a little different in that she set it all up and maybe thinking that she wouldn't go through with it, or like Lita would back out and not like jump all over it and be like, yeah, hell yeah, I'm all in. I want to do everything.
Right.
And at that point she was like, whoa, okay, we can get out of this, knowing that she was essentially giving up the funding, right? If that kid had backed out, what was that kid's name? I already forgot his name. If he had backed out, then the deal was off. She wasn't going to get any of the money that she was, going to get from the Skolden family, in which they had a lot of. So, maybe there's a little bit of redemption there if it really wasn't the best decision or the best choice to kind of put her daughter in that position. Okay, so let's talk about Broom Boy was his name. That's not it. You're in the wrong era, buddy. Okay, so let's talk about just quickly on as a wife. First off, I want to say that Alistair McKenzie, the guy that played Perrin, did a really, really good job with that character. We got to see that speech he gives, was really that redemption speech. And you'd mentioned it. I don't know if we, just to provide context for anybody that didn't know, Gilroy realized after season 1 that people were looking negatively towards Perrin, which I don't know, like you said, I don't know that we had any other way to interpret who that guy was given what had happened. And I think maybe he realized, okay, yeah, that's not what I wanted. I get why people did that. And so he actually went back and tried to, paint him a little bit more nicer and certainly more of a family man, at least a better father than we were thinking he was going to be. Interesting. I saw there was a interview with one of the writers, and I forget which one it was now. Drawing a blank on the guy's name. It's Bo, maybe, I forget now. One of the main writers, but anyways, in that last scene where we see Perrin riding with Skolden's wife, drinking whatever, that scene originally called for him being just with some kind of an alien, right? Character that wasn't anybody interesting, and somebody wrote, oh, it should be Skolden's wife, and they're like, oh yeah, that's brilliant. But even before that, Gilroy had a scene in here where I think Mon goes back to Chandrilla and she's packing up all her stuff. I think Andor stops by there to pick her up or whatever, to get her stuff and things. And when she's there, Perrin confronts her and is like, hey, I knew all this was going on. I knew your ties to the rebellion. I knew what you were doing. And yet I never did anything or said anything. I kept your secret safe. And, and then she, of course, leaves as well, which that really changes the dynamic of the character. And it wasn't what Gilroy wanted. He thought it was very intriguing. He liked the idea. It certainly sounds interesting, but he really wanted Perrin to kind of be the character that we see at the end of the movie. But when I read that or saw that interview, I was like, whoa, that would have been nuts to know that. I mean, that would have been a really, really big churn in terms of how we perceive Perrin to be and some of the assumptions that we made based on his behaviors and actions during season 1.
Oh, I agree with that. I think, but also I think it would have fit right in with season 2. Because I mean, we see even in the preparation for the wedding, we still feel that dissonance between them. We still feel that tension between them. But you also feel that there is a genuine care for one another. And in Mask of Fear, they talk about their relation is kind of like a relationship, is kind of like a pendulum. It just ebbs and flows. It's got peaks and valleys. There's moments when they when they're very close and intimate, and there's time when they're very, very far apart.
Mm.
And it's just the nature of who they are as people and the nature of their relationship. And I think also the nature of him feeling like a second fiddle and feeling less important. And that's where some of that petulant child stuff comes out in season 1, I think, right?
Yeah,
and
right.
so you get some of those feelings, and Perrin tends to be a little bit more dynamic in that way. And I would have loved to have seen that scene, because I think it would have showed us at his commitment to Mon Mothma in a way that we have to try to interpret with what we have on screen now, right?
Yeah.
It would have really reaffirmed that, and I don't think it would have broken character for him at all, though. I think it would just been how he manages the political arena with her, because we have glimpses of that too. Like, he needs to go do his part, and she does her part, and we see this in the books as well. And they are a team in that way, and that was the agreement of their partnership, right? It's more of a partnership in that way than it is maybe a traditional husband and wife relationship, that's built on all of the feelings and everything. And theirs is much more strategic in many ways too.
Yeah.
And they know their jobs, and they know what they do well, and they know what they need. And he's kind of the frat boy, and he needs to go out there and schmooze people and build the relationship aspects of it. But it would have been great to give him a little credibility of saying, look, I'm not dumb. I see it in a very serious tone. I understand what you're doing. And whether he supports it or not, his commitment to her has always been that he will support what she feels is best, for whatever their directive is, right? That they're on that same page, even if they can't maybe be in that space together or whatnot, and they're going to go their separate ways. I thought that would have been a nice touch for the character to address his commitment to her on some level that maybe didn't come through as neatly or cleanly, maybe intentionally, but as I think what they probably truly have, which is a little unfortunate, because I think there is more there that they have to their relationship.
Yeah. You honestly kind of took almost verbatim some of my talking points on my thoughts on their relationship. So good job.
Wow.
I got the sense that their relationship was genuinely sincere. Like there's no doubt in my mind that at some point they did love each other, whether they grew into that love because it was arranged or whatever, but there definitely was something there. It felt like by the time we caught up with them in Andor, a lot of what they were doing was for the sake of keeping up appearances, for the benefit of both of them, whether it was, Mon's political angle or his frat boy hanging out with people with lots of money kind of thing. I mean, they were both benefiting from staying together in that relationship.
You can imagine after 20 plus years, that gets a little bit old.
Yeah.
For both of them. Yeah.
There was probably an aspect of Lita as well, staying together for her, showing, and we see that a lot. That kind of mimics life in a lot of ways. Now, whether or not there was anything romantically with them, I doubt it at that point. It felt like they were just kind of doing what they did, and it's been years. And again, there's and that's why I think Tacoma was kind of, when he came back into her life, it was like, whoa, that fire is burning again in her, because it burnt out for Perrin so long ago. And then just the idea that they probably did keep a lot of secrets from each other. I mean, they probably knew each other better than anybody else in the world. And yet because of that, they were able to keep secrets, both of them. Now, Mons were probably arguably had more gravity to them and more weight to them. But, she was out there doing a lot of this stuff. And, that scene that was never brought in aside, she was able to keep all that from Perrin and do all of this stuff. So that kind of speaks to, just, I guess, the trust that she had in him, which we kind of established, I think, in season 1, that she really couldn't trust him because he was so close to a lot of Imperial folk out there, a lot of Imperial political figures as well.
Yeah, Zarellan's had a great comment. I love the duality of Perrin. That story that Dan Gilroy wanted to do for him and Mon is canon as far as she's concerned.
Yeah. It's a great idea. I was really excited when I read that or saw the interview. But that's not what we got. But okay. So let's just kind of wrap this up, I guess, in one of her roles. And let's talk about her kind of rebel leader role. Yeah. I mentioned earlier, it started off as really just kind of a financial backer. I almost want to know, like, I don't remember if this came up in the Alexander Freed book, but how Luthen and Mothma met. Because didn't they jump into it? They were already...
Luthen's not in that book.
I know Luthen's on it. I was thinking of Bail Organa. But no, I kind of want to know what brought them together. I'm thinking might be Vale, because she kind of seems like that link that brought those two together. But like, what was the pitch that Luthen gave her about, hey, we need you? And she was like, cool, this is exactly what I need because I'm not getting any traction politically, whatever that is. I think that's a very interesting story. Maybe that gets told at some point, but yeah, she starts off as kind of this financial backer. She then kind of moves into essentially the backbone of the rebellion, not necessarily the rebellion, rebel alliance formally, although she does step into that a little bit. I think she brought a lot of morality to those groups, right? We see that on screen a number of times, but she was really kind of that person, the conscious of, hey, this is something we shouldn't do, even though they probably did it anyways, and they still did a lot of horrible things. She was at least the one that said, look, I don't agree with this, right? I dissent in some of these actions and the directives that we're trying to take, and having to come to terms and understand that like there were no other options, there were no good options, unfortunately here. So she allowed those groups to not lose themselves in war or become like the enemy, which they were fighting, right? The fascist aggressors that were they were fighting up against. And then she also kind of fell into this role of kind of like the touchstone. She was, we had all these different rebel factions out there, and the one thing that was really pulling all of them together was Mon Mothma, and a lot of it came from her political work that she did. Again, a lot of people seeing that just genuine sincerity in her wanting to do what's right. Maybe not necessarily the pacifist approach, but certainly trying to do the right thing was probably attractive for a lot of these groups, and feeling like, okay, I can't trust that faction because they could turn on me, right? We saw that when Cassian went to that one planet and you had factions that were fighting each other. She was not one of those figures. And so a lot of ways she was the glue that really kind of held all these together until it was finally cauterized as a former rebel alliance later down the road. So that's kind of where she fit into. And, whether she felt truly comfortable as, the leader of the rebel alliance, I don't know, because we don't really get any sense of that. Because by the time we get caught up with her again, she's already in Return of the Jedi, and a number of years have passed since then. We know for a fact that, she struggled quite a bit as the chancellor for the New Republic, like we mentioned earlier. And so, yeah, it's an interesting role that I think she was willing to take it on because they needed it. She was succeeded by Leia, I guess, after that point. So, she handed it off to a good person, but it didn't seem like she was necessarily fit to be, or she really relished or wanted to be in that role. She probably felt like I was the best person and the person that people needed at that time, but I don't think it was anything that made her any more happier than, being a politician in the Senate.
Yeah, it's one of those, you kind of have to be the moral figurehead. You have to be the one that that you have that voice of reason on the board, because a lot of these things were being put together before people knew she was even involved, right? The cohesiveness of the rebellion, bringing the fractured pieces of it and molding something together. She was doing it from kind of behind the scenes. But what was important is, like we talked about earlier, is her bringing forth that goodwill of this is a good person that is working in the best interest of the galaxy and not herself, right? And we kind of get this in the High Republic with Lena So. Lena So is such a great kind of comparison with Mon Mothma in many ways, because there's so many similarities, I think, in how they build their character. Lena So may have been a little more ambitious, but I think some of the personality traits are still kind of there, and that quiet strength that I think both women have. But what I like about it is that then you have Mon Mothma stepping up and not being afraid to call out the monster, right? And speaking up when the whole galaxy is feeling this and knows it's true, to see someone that they trust and that they value and they feel is working in their best interest to finally come out and say the truth that we all are afraid to say really does resonate and really can bring the rest of it together and kind of put the final pieces together. And again, know that you have that person involved, even if you're not sure about some of these other groups and other people that are there and there's a little bit of bickering, you have someone in the room that's going to be the one to try to bring everything back to the table and apply some of those political skills, but also the realistic nature of it all too, of saying, this is the realities of war, and she's now a war leader, part of a war council effectively. But can we do this in a way that still regards life where we can, while we're still fighting this tyrannical government that doesn't care about life whatsoever?
Yep. Yeah.
And you need that figurehead, right? You need that person that you feel like you can look to them and say, I can trust that more often than not, they're going to guide me in the right way, and their heart is always in the right place.
Yeah. And you're right. That's why she was such a good fit for it, even if she wasn't necessarily jumping at it or thriving in it.
Yeah, she certainly didn't want it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
She was nervous as hell, like before the speech and everything, because she's like, this shouldn't be me. I mean, it was kind of like Padme over again, trying to defer to Bail. Like it should kind of be Bail Organa, right? He's the defiant one, right? He's he's the one that's always got the rah speeches, not necessarily her.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even bring that up. Padme and her, earlier on, those two worked really well together because it was a good cop, bad cop, and not necessarily bad cop, but Padme was the outspoken one. She was the one that was like, almost like the Leia figurehead, where Mon Mothma could be the kind of the more pacifist and
she could be the negotiator, the one that to mend the fences a little bit and be the reasonable one to let's find common ground.
Right, rough out the edges after Padme came in headstrong with things. Yeah,
and Bail very much the same kind of way, right? He goes in sometimes guns blazing. It definitely can be that person to get things done too, but when he believes in something, he's like a bull in a china shop with his beliefs, right?
I want to just we're kind of coming up in a little bit the very end here, but going back to Luthen's speech when he's talking about all of the things that he sacrificed.
Yeah.
He says, "What is my sacrifice?" And he talks about, "I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat the enemy, et cetera, et cetera." Mon Mothma gives up. I mean, she sacrifices a lot of things. I know we've already talked about a lot of them as part of this. Whether it was, her political role, she sacrificed that, giving that final speech. She sacrificed part of her relationship with both her husband and her daughter. She's certainly sacrificed a lot of her own personal self, and just like we mentioned, the weight of the lies and the secrets, the bloodshed that she knew was happening, even though she turned that blind eye at times. All of that was continuing to weigh on her, and she was sacrificing bits and pieces of her, morally as some of that happened. And then, of course, the betrothing of her daughter, which is, again, back going to that personal level. But I mean, she really does sacrifice quite a bit. And you think about it, all of these characters sacrifice. I mean, that Luthen speech, I know we keep coming back to it, but that Luthen speech really applies to a lot of the characters in, not only Andor, but obviously in Rogue One. And it just kind of speaks to the cost and the toll that a rebellion takes on people and war takes on folks. But she, more than a lot of other people, I think, sacrificed quite a bit. And then I think that's why when we get to the very end, when Andor is talking about none of you knew Luthen the way we did, and nobody here but her, because she was so close to it all, and he understood how much she had sacrificed. He was willing to kind of listen to her, but didn't want to hear anything from anybody else. But I don't know, anything you want to say or speak to in terms of sacrifice, or anything that we haven't touched on that she probably did give up in her role, either as a politician or later down the road as a Rebel Alliance leader.
I think what I love about the sacrifice speech, when you think about it, if you think about Luthen, if he was to write this down, and if he's writing this on paper and going through it, and then as he thinks about Mon Mothma and what does he need to do? If I truly believe the words that I'm writing in this speech, that I wrote this equation for 15 years, there's only one conclusion: he's damned.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if Mon Mothma is in that same circle, what are the things in this speech that I need to do to keep her on the peripheral, as far to the edge of that circle as possible, so she doesn't get sucked in to be me? Right. And then I think you made the comparison that they're similar in many ways, but he is actively kind of keeping her on those outward bounds. I think that's the fascinating part about the speech, because you're right. There are a lot of similarities. There are a lot of things that you can apply to Mon Mothma that are a bit universal for many characters, but I think Mon Mothma in particular, but you see that she's not necessarily condemned in the way that he is in many of the things. And she's certainly not going down the same rabbit hole that he's had to do. And while she may have sacrificed like Tay indirectly, Luthen is the one making the call. He's the one putting the blaster in Lonnie's chest, right?
Yeah.
She's not having to do that dirty work where he's committed to doing it. And he will do anything that he can. And we see this throughout season 2, especially early on, of how do I make sure that she is as protected as possible season 1 too. And that's why he gets so angry with her of like, what are you doing? You're getting sloppy and you're getting desperate, right? Don't get desperate. So I think those are some of the things I just think about when you think about the speech in particular of what was Luthen doing as he thinks through all of this. And then he compares himself with Mon Mothma. What is it that he feels like he needs to do differently to keep her clean and to keep her as that symbol of hope that they need when things get when the Band-Aid finally gets ripped off and the bombs start dropping without any kind of preamble and there's no hidden agenda with it anymore. The Empire just is the Empire, and they just show you who they are and the Death Star and all of that. Who needs to be that symbol of hope, and what do I need to do to make sure they're there? And I wonder if Mon Mothma reflects on any of that. And when Cassian is talking about this and has that moment of appreciation of understanding what Luthen has truly kind of done for her, and then she can honor the good parts of that. There's a lot of tension, a lot of bad stuff too, but how could she take the good stuff of that and honor that, and making sure that everything that they've done, all of the sacrifices they make collectively have finally truly means something, and they make the most of those opportunities that they afforded them. And so it's just kind of a nice dichotomy between those two characters, I think, that are like just forever linked, I think, in this series.
So let's kind of maybe wrap up here, and I just want to get your thoughts on the speech. We didn't get a really chance to kind of talk through it, break it down when we did the breakdown of the episode that this one came out in, which I'm already drawing a blank on. But the speech itself, it was a great speech, and I think we spent some time when we compared it to the Rebel speech that she gives, and the difference there and the audience differences. We've talked a lot about that, but there are some interesting bits and pieces in here. When she starts off saying, "I believe we are in a crisis," speaking to this fabricated escalation that's happened on Gorman. I don't remember how she got the intel, and that's really not important because time is weird in Star Wars. But then she goes on saying the distance between what is said and what is known to be true has become an abyss. Of all the things at risk, the loss of objective reality is perhaps the most dangerous. And again, she's speaking to the propaganda that is being spewed out there about the Gormans and how they're being portrayed by the Empire, and how that's starting to trickle to the galaxy. So that when the time comes for them to kind of snuff them out, and everybody's like, well, they're terrible people, so we don't really care. And really, if you think about it, she's talking about object reality. That's the absolute opposite of what the Empire does. I mean, they are 100% subjective reality, right? Whatever they want the narrative to be is what it essentially is. And
actively creating new narratives.
Actively creating those narratives. And so she's hit the nail on the head here 100%. And definitely it's kind of seeing through a lot of this stuff here. She talks about the death of truth as ultimate victory of evil. You think about like Palpatine's rise to power when she says that. The Clone Wars, the Gorman massacre. Right? There's countless examples of where all of that, where truth has died and has led to these horrible things, and acts of violence that the Empire is using to, get even more power in the galaxy. And I don't want to necessarily go through all of this, but
this next line I think is probably the one most interesting line. When truth leaves us, when we let it slip away, when it is ripped from our hands, we become vulnerable to the appetite of whatever monster screams the loudest. Mm-hmm. What I like about it is that it's accountability for everybody involved. So it's not only the people who are spewing the nonsense and trying to drive the false narrative, it's also us about critical thinking, about how that we interpret it, how we hear it. What do we do with the information that we have? How do we create the dialogue and have the debate in a respectful way so that we don't denigrate and degenerate into something else, right? It's that's the part about when we let that slip away, ripped away. We understand that. We equate that with the Empire, right? But if we allow it to go because of our own behavior, that's an accountability. That's something that we can control. Mm-hmm. And so I like that she's kind of holding everybody accountable in a very subtle way of saying we all have a role to play in this. But if we don't do our part, then we get what we have. And we see this in our own society with like social media in particular, right? Sometimes it's who screams the loudest, or you can't really trust what's there. And we start to spread and share information that might be only partially true or completely untrue, and we have a hard time deciphering what is real and what is not real, and then you're on a path to just ultimate destruction in some ways in that regard.
Yeah, and certainly being further influenced by those powers, and falling into believing narratives and that sort of thing. But she goes on to talk about how Gorman was genocide, calling it for what it was, and there was people that start booing her at this point in the speech.
Yeah.
So it's clear that people don't see it that way because of the power of the empire and the influence the empire is propagated throughout the Senate now. Maybe even just because they're lying in their pocketbooks and they know there's profit to be had by siding with the empire versus standing up against somebody like standing with someone like Mon Mothma. And then she ends with that quintessential iconic line of the monster that will come. The truth and the monster screaming the loudest. The monster we helped create, the monster that will come for all soon enough, is Emperor Palpatine. Just calling Palpatine out explicitly. I mean, she knew going into this was it. I mean, Luthen said as much, when you're done, you got to get out of there, right? I mean, everybody knew this was it, but she absolutely realizes that she had to do it. I love the fact that she was so hesitant and nervous and anxious and stressed out about delivering the speech because she ultimately knew what was going to happen when she concluded that speech, because no one that I'm aware of, and you would think no one has probably directly called out Palpatine for who he is and the things that he's done in this manner before. But knowing that that's kind of that spark, that proverbial spark in Star Wars that was needed in order to kind of kick off the rebellion. So it'd be interesting to kind of understand Palpatine's take on that speech. I mean, you got to know that he got wind of this at some point, right? And was it this, or was it a number of things where, just shortly after the speech is delivered that he finally abolishes the Senate? Right. It's not much longer when he just gets rid of it all. Yeah. Right. Was this kind of the final nail in the coffin where he's like, okay, we had enough of these jokers. I'm just going to abolish it and put the government in the hands of the local people at this point.
I think that's absolutely right. I think this is probably the last straw of Senator Mothma, and he's just done. Her and Bail Organa and all of these other. I've just had enough of all of this. I've allowed this to go on too long. Yeah. It's time to exit. But I like it. Again, what I like about the speech is that there's a certain amount of personal responsibility that she takes. We all helped create this. We've allowed this to fester. We've allowed this. It doesn't mean they haven't tried to fight or resist against it or put things in place to try to offset some of the power or take some of it away. And they've had some clever plans in the books and stuff too. But at the end of the day, when you capitulate or when you kind of lose, you're still kind of building it all, and you just allow your freedoms to slowly erode or slowly be taken away from you or slowly ripped from your hands. And this is kind of what you get. But I mean, bold to just throw the gauntlet down and just call the emperor for what he is, and and clearly the galaxy responded. I mean, that's the thing. She took that chance, and I love the way that it was delivered by Genevieve O'Reilly. I mean, you just sense that nervousness, like you were saying. Even when she's giving the speech, you just feel like her anxiety levels, her heart's probably just racing as fast as it ever has in her entire life, not knowing what's going to happen, not really knowing what's going to come out of her mouth, and am I going to be able to get to the end of this before something happens? And to get through it all, pretty incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it was a proverbial paradigm shift for her. It was going to, the point of no return in a lot of ways. The event horizon of all of this was really at this moment when she delivered that speech.
Yeah, and it's interesting in A New Hope, the Imperial Senate will not sit still for this. Leia, going off on what she has seen firsthand, right, happen,
right,
and knows this open rebellion has got out, and is catching wildfire now, and she knows what it is, and the Empire, the invader, and them are like, no, we're good.
Yeah, I'm sure there was pockets fermenting in within the Senate after this.
They were definitely fermenting.
Fermenting, yes. Yeah. Okay, let's wrap this up and just kind of talk about. I have a question here about will we ever see Mon Mothma again? And we can speak about Genevieve O'Reilly as well. I mean, there's opportunities, I think. But anything
we already have.
Yeah, I mean, we have. We've seen her in Ahsoka.
Oddly enough, the title card I use is actually from Ahsoka, not from Andor.
Oh, really? I didn't catch that. Good job.
Yeah.
It's a great picture of her, by the way.
That's what I thought. I was like, man, this is such a wonderful picture, and it's
Yeah.
just her, and it's like her at her best, I think. Yeah, this is with Hera's trial or whatever it was.
But what would you like to see more of from Mon Mothma, and when and where?
You know, I get more interested in, well, I think the Mandalorian and Grogu movie has the opportunity if we start to flirt with First Order.
Yeah.
Right. We keep talking about New Republic, New Republic, New Republic. At some point, it seems like Mon Mothma's name needs to be dropped at the very least. If not, we see some of the machinations. Now, Mandalorian and Grogu is not a political show, right? We had a flavor of it, and people really didn't respond super well to some of that when Carson Teva was going into and trying to find resources, and they're like, nah, we're really tapped, and that's really expensive, and like, you know, bureaucracy, what am I going to do? You know, people didn't really respond to that, which I think within the context of the show, totally get that. It didn't really respond we understood it, but it was a little out of character, right? So I think but it's got to be somewhere, right? Because there's things that have to be falling apart. And I think the demilitarization of the New Republic is a part of that, and understanding where she sits and all of that too. And again, we've seen it in the books, but to have some of that come out to really understand how the First Order was able to actually rise and take control like that, I think she would be a central part of it. I also don't want that, because I don't want to diminish the character that we've known and we've grown to love in this way. Even though we know every character is fallible and every character is going to make mistakes and things change and you don't always adjust the right way. But it would be really difficult to see potentially the character on the downside of her career that's paving a way for a new tyrannical government to step in, you know, or whatever you want to call the First Order, you know. So I think that's the hard part about if we see her again, it's probably not the greatest of stories, you know, it's on the backslide. And I honestly just don't know if I want that. I kind of want to preserve this character. I just love the character so much. But I think there's also compelling story potential there, but it's going to be hard to watch.
Yeah, I think so too. No, I'm with you. Like that is going to be difficult to watch if it plays out the way we expect it to play out from, you know, Empire's End and kind of what happens there.
Yeah.
That is difficult, but I think that's probably an opportunity for us to kind of learn more about her character. You know, we see bits and pieces where she's really successful, then falls apart, kind of thing. But yeah, I had, you know, as Chancellor in the New Republic, you know, part of the Filoniverse is certainly there. You know, I mentioned earlier about how did Luthen and Mon meet in that relationship. Maybe that's a side story or something, you know, a comic. I don't know, where you get something there. It doesn't seem like it'd be any kind of a full-fledged type you know, episode or anything or series. And then I think the other one that I feel like is still out there, although it feels it could be a repeat or retread of something we've already had. But, you know, that whole line of many Bothan spies died to bring us, you know, this information, right? There's a story to be told there. And that's one of the reasons we mentioned earlier that Bothans, if you don't know the history on Bothans, it's kind of crazy. Like they won't officially canonically talk about what they look like. In Legends, they were like the wolf looking things, or I forget now. They had like ears. They were like animals, furry humanoid characters, but they've never really given us a definition or any kind of clue of what the Bothans were, what they look like. And so that, and they've intentionally done that. I saw it was Matt Martin, who was part of the story group. I think he still is now, but Matt Martin had said that they've intentionally not defined what the Bothans look like because they want to leave that open for somebody to tell that story. And so I think there's probably an opportunity there to kind of tell that story of, you know, what the Bothans went through, and maybe Mon has a critical role to play in all that. And so we kind of get to see her, you know, kind of in that prime of her, you know, having done that already once, you know, during the rise of the Death Star there, or the first Death Star. Maybe there's a story to be told there with the second Death Star. But again, it does feel like it's a retread, but, you know, wouldn't be the first time we've done that in Star Wars.
Right. And Zora Allen's had a great comment too. You know, she wants more of Mon, I think more in the books than in TV or film. And she hasn't read Mask of Fear, but she's so excited to read that one. And again, we know we're going to get more Mon Mothma in the Reign of the Empire series from Alexander Freed. So some of these things, I don't know what the actual timeline is going to look like in that book series, but we know it's a trilogy, right? So we know we're getting 2 more books. So we'll get more of her in that regard. And who knows? I mean, if they start to expand further into the Empire era or Imperial era, I guess, maybe we will, at least on paper, see some of the early stages of that Luthen Mon Mothma relationship, or the crossing of paths and how things actually maybe got initiated and started.
Yeah.
How do you find kindred spirits in a way, you know? How did he sell this for her, you know, to get on there about it?
So I was laughing at One Up versus CPU. He said dog capybaras is what they look like.
Capicabras?
Oh, capicabras. I think it's a capybara mix with a chupacabra.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
He says kind of lion-like.
Yeah. Yeah, go look them up. They're kind of weird looking. And again, they've been through a couple different iterations. So
in my head, it's Cassian Andor survived on from Scarif, and this is him and his crew secretly out there undercover, still working.
Oh, that's
for
the new.
rebellion.
That's their team name, the Bothans.
That's right.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah. So it's not a species or anything. It's just it's a crew.
You know, in Legends, she dies right before the Yuzong Vong show up.
We need to bring the Yuzong Vong back.
I knew it. I just set you up for that one. That was all.
Yeah.
So you could get that in. So
Such a good villain.
shut up. Yeah, Mike Rondo, take that. Okay. Well. Oh no! Look, he said capybaras is correct spelling. Capybaras is correct.
I like
spelling. All right.
capicabras. That sounds fancy.
I like capicabras too. That's a chupacabra and a capybara mixed together.
I like it. Let's blend it.
All right. Hey, you know what else we like to blend? No, that's not right.
No, that doesn't work at all.
No, not at all. You're better at this. Go right ahead.
You know what we always spell correctly? That's the names of our Patreon members at the very end of the show. Remember, if you're a Patreon member, stay tuned to the end credits. You get to see your name up on the screen if you're one of those qualifying tiers. Huge thanks to everyone who came out for the live stream tonight as well. Risk, Alex, Steph, Music Trains Around, One for CPUs, My Star Wars Guys, Rafi Shoots, ktdcast.com/YouTube if you're listening. Hope you'll come out for the live stream. Please like the video. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. Welcome. We hope that you'll join us. And Albert already flashed on the screen, but ktdcast.com/Patreon if you're curious about some of our Patreon content and all the things we have there. Go back and watch that episode, or even listen to that episode that we did for Mon Mothma on Patreon as an exclusive there a few months ago. That was a good show. We compared kind of what we anticipate with the speech versus what we got. So good episode there. That was a lot of fun.
We may have gotten some things right too, which would be kind of cool if we did, but
maybe so.
Don't count on it. Okay. Well, we'll leave the show there. Again, yeah. Thanks everybody for joining us. Thank you all the Patreon members, people that joined us in the live stream tonight. And of course, don't forget to join us.
Yeah. Thanks to our YouTube members, by the way, as well.
Yeah. We got a couple on with us tonight. So
yeah.
If we,
Boomhauer has slipped in to the end of the chat.
And because he's in Texas, I'm going to throw it up here. I have to throw it. I live in Texas, saw a capybara the other night. Capicabra is what he saw. Capicabra.
Nice.
So we gotta get somebody to draw what that looks like. I'm pretty sure I saw a chupacabra when I was really young, but maybe not. So anyways, we'll be back in a week for the Patreon show. And then next Sunday, we'll come back and do the Empire and the Rebels from the Andor series. So a spotlight on some of the characters and the shenanigans that were going on there. So thanks you guys so much for joining us, and we'll see you all here on the next episode.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.